Hello, I'm Christopher. Today we are diving into the cases where influencers got far too close to wild animals and paid the price for it. From a saltwater crocodile that pulled a vlogger to a filmmaker who stepped out of a vehicle in front of a charging elephant. But first, we start in northern India, where a wildlife filmmaker paid a small fee to get inside a leopard feeding corridor and found out exactly what happens when you cross the line. June 14th, 2013. Northern India. Heat that sat over the region with still air and no cloud cover breaking it. That was the day Alex Mercer arrived at a point where routine filming stopped being enough as he set out to film Indian leopards, a species known for speed, power, and being extremely fast and unpredictable at close range. Alex was 28, from Birmingham, England. He had been running a wildlife YouTube channel for about 3 years. The content was decent, the editing was clean, and he genuinely cared about animals. But caring about animals and understanding them are two very different things, and that gap is what makes this story so hard to watch unfold. His numbers had plateaued around 40,000 subscribers. He had noticed that the creators getting the most views weren't the ones with the best information. They were the ones with the closest footage. Alex had been playing it safe for 3 years, but this time he decided to take the risk. He decided this India trip was where that would change. The facility was a small private leopard rehabilitation operation, about 45 miles outside a mid-sized city in northern India. A modest, underfunded setup that took in injured or illegally captured leopards and worked to return them to the wild. Small staff, limited resources, and rules that existed mostly on paper. Alex had arranged access through a local contact. For a small fee, he was allowed into the service corridors during the afternoon feeding session. These were narrow passages, about 4 feet wide, running alongside each enclosure. Staff used them to deliver food through slots in the bars. Those slots were wide enough to pass a food tray through. They were also wide enough for a leopard to fully extend a forearm. He was told to stay behind a painted line on the corridor floor and not to crouch near the bars during feeding. He agreed to all of it, and then he slowly stopped doing all of it. In the beginning, he stayed behind the line. The footage was fine, but fine wasn't the goal anymore. He began inching closer to get a better angle. He kept shifting his position to frame the shot differently. By the time the leopard was fully engaged with its food, Alex was inside 3 feet of the feeding bars. Now here is what I think gets missed in stories like this. Alex wasn't being reckless for the sake of being reckless. He genuinely thought he could read the animal. He thought the leopard was focused on the food and not on him. And that belief, that quiet confidence that he had figured out the situation, is exactly what makes the next part happen. The leopard inside was a large male, around 130 pounds, wild caught in the facility for less than a year. It had been eating for about 20 minutes, and I believe it had been tracking Alex's movements through the bars the entire time. Indian leopards are among the most explosive big cats in Asia. They weigh between 80 and 165 pounds, but their forelimbs carry a level of striking power that does not match their size. During feeding, sudden nearby movement can trigger defensive or reactive striking behavior. Their strikes are rapid, short, and violent. One swipe and a retraction. The leopard stopped eating. Head came up slowly, and the strike came with no further warning. The leopard's forelimb shot through the bar gap, and the claws connected across Alex's left shoulder and upper arm in a single, violent swipe. As his body twisted from the impact, the claws raked across the side of his neck during retraction. The neck wound was not the intended target. It was the result of being too close when the strike happened. A second swipe followed almost immediately, catching his right forearm as he raised it. After that, the leopard withdrew, pacing the enclosure wall and striking the bars intermittently, still agitated but no longer reaching through. And this is the part that gets me every time. The whole thing took within a few seconds. That is all it takes. One wrong position, one swipe, and the situation is irreversible. Staff reached the corridor within about a minute and used metal poles and noise to force the leopard back from the bars. Alex was found on the ground with severe injuries to his arm and neck, with heavy blood loss from the neck wound. Pressure was applied immediately while emergency services were contacted. The nearest hospital was over an hour away by road. Despite rapid stabilization attempts, Alex went into shock during transport and died before medical assistance could take over. The recording device was recovered after the incident, but the footage from the attack was unusable due to impact disruption and positioning. The facility chose not to release any material from the incident, citing concerns that it could encourage unsafe access attempts at similar rehabilitation sites. He was not reckless in the way most people imagine when they hear a story like this. He just kept moving forward one small step at a time until the steps ran out. But if Alex's story feels like a slow build to a terrible moment, the next one is the opposite. In Indonesia, 1 year later, there was no slow build. There was no warning at all, just open water, a wooden boat, and a predator that had already made its decision before anyone on that boat even knew it was there. It was September 3rd, 2014, an afternoon in central Indonesia, over a coastal river where the water moved slow and brown through dense green banks. Daniel Reyes was already on the water with a waterproof camera and a planned shoot underway. Daniel Reyes was 31, from Phoenix, Arizona. He had been running an adventure vlog for 3 years, built around extreme water activities. His numbers had been dropping for months, and he needed something different. The Indonesia trip had one specific goal: saltwater crocodiles, filmed from close range, from water level. He booked passage on a small independent river tour run by 2 local guides out of a basic riverside camp. No formal registration, no safety procedures, no waiver. Just a wooden flat hull boat with an outboard motor and a handshake. The waterway ran through an area where fishing activity was common. Waste and scraps from years of fishing along this stretch had occasionally drawn scavenging crocodiles close to areas of human activity near the water. This did not make it a trained feeding zone. It simply meant crocodiles in this area had fewer reasons than usual to stay away from boats. Daniel spent most of the afternoon at the bow, leaning over the side to film at water level. He splashed his hand into the water repeatedly and tapped the hull to create movement and surface disturbance for the shot. What he did not know was that a large saltwater crocodile was already present in that stretch of river, staying submerged and undetected. Nothing visible indicated its position. The vibrations from the boat and the repeated impacts on the water signaled unusual activity in their immediate area, increasing the crocodile's awareness of unusual activity nearby. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptiles on Earth, reaching up to 23 feet and weighing over 2,200 pounds. Their bite force exceeds 3,700 pounds per square inch, among the strongest bite forces recorded in any living animal. They are ambush hunters, capable of launching from still water at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. A brief surface disturbance may precede the strike, but by the time it is visible, the attack is already committed. The surface beside the boat barely shifted before the crocodile came out of it. The strike caught Daniel across the torso as he leaned over the edge. The jaw closed across his body. The crocodile adjusted its grip and used its weight to pull him over the side and into the water. What happened next was not orderly. The crocodile drove into a violent spin underwater, wrenching Daniel's body in unpredictable directions. The rolls were not rhythmic or timed. They were explosive, irregular bursts of rotational force that shifted based on his body's resistance, each one pulling him deeper and forcing air from his lungs. There was no surface movement that told a clean story. The guides saw him go in. One grabbed a rope and threw it toward where Daniel had disappeared, but the water was dark and he was already under. There was nothing to pull back. The rope hit the surface and sat there useless. Nobody dared step into that water, considering the crocodile was still in it. Emergency services were eventually reached, but the remote location meant a long delay before any response arrived. A search operation ran for 5 days. Remains were recovered downstream days later, fragmented and scattered. The tour operator faced minimal consequences and continued operating. Daniel's waterproof camera was never recovered from the river bottom. No footage existed to review. The exact cause of the attack is still unknown. Whether the splashing played a role or not is impossible to determine. Here's what stays with me about this one. Daniel did not do one dramatic thing wrong. He leaned over a boat. He splashed some water. He tapped the hull. Each of those things on its own means nothing. Together, in that specific stretch of river, with an animal already in the water below him, they were enough. The next story takes us somewhere that should have been safer. An enclosed facility, physical barriers, staff on site. But as it turns out, a fence only protects you if you stay on the right side of it. May 21st, 2015, rural Thailand. The kind of afternoon where the heat just refuses to let go. Humid and still, everything moving a little slower than it should. Maria Kovalenko had been on the property for about 3 hours when things went wrong. Maria Kovalenko was 29, originally from Kyiv, Ukraine. She ran a wildlife tourism and travel channel focused on eco-friendly destinations across Southeast Asia. Her content focused focused on smaller, lesser-known animal facilities that rarely got any public attention. She had come to Thailand specifically to document a small private facility housing rescued captive tigers, confiscated from illegal trade or unsafe ownership, the kind of place most travel creators ignored entirely. I think about that a lot when I go through this story. Maria was not there to sensationalize anything. She was there because she believed those facilities deserved scrutiny, and her audience deserved to see what was actually happening inside them. That instinct was correct. It was also, eventually, the thing that put her in the wrong place. The facility was a small private operation outside a provincial town. It was home to the tigers who had been seized from illicit activities. The owner provided the woman total access to the facility during the afternoon, even explaining the facility's structure to her. She was supposed to watch from here. For safety measures, one of the staff members was also assisting her. By 2:45, the tigers were already pacing. Feeding was at 3. She spent the first hour doing what she came for, shooting the perimeter in sections, noting rust along the lower rails, uneven tension in the chain link, and water buckets that hadn't been consistently refilled. Small maintenance details, the kind that showed how the facility actually functioned day to day, rather than how it was presented. Her camera also captured the same structural issues and maintenance problems in real time. That's when she found the service corridor. It ran between the outer perimeter fence and the enclosure itself, narrow enough that one person could pass through at a time. Staff used it during feeding rounds to access the enclosures directly. The gate had been left unlocked specifically because feeding preparation was actively underway, a temporary window that would normally close again once staff returned to secure it. It was clearly marked as a danger area, labeled as staff only. Before stepping away to assist with feeding on the other side of the property, the staff member had been direct with Maria. The viewing area was the boundary. Beyond it was restricted and dangerous. She acknowledged it. The staff member left, and she pushed the gate open and walked in anyway. I have spent a long time thinking about what was going through her mind at that moment. The staff member had just told her to stay put. She heard it, and she just did not stop. She was in the middle of filming something she genuinely cared about. It was not defiance. It was not recklessness. It was just momentum. The quiet belief that one step would not change anything. The enclosure fence along the inside of that corridor had a gap near the lower frame where attachment points had pulled away from the post over time. Later, the staff made clear that the problem had already been observed at some point. What was recorded was contested during the investigation process. Indo-Chinese tigers are native to Thailand and much of Southeast Asia. Males typically weigh between 300 and 420 pounds. Their forelimbs are powerful enough to knock large animals off their feet with a single swipe. During feeding periods, captive tigers become highly reactive around enclosure boundaries. The tiger had been pacing the far side. What followed was reconstructed from scene evidence and staff accounts. The tiger moved toward the fence and reached through the gap at the lower frame. As Maria lost her balance and fell sideways against the inner fence, the tiger's claws caught the side of her neck and jaw through the opening. The outer fence was directly behind her. Nowhere to go. The contact was brief and explosive, but it was enough to cause catastrophic injury in seconds. I keep coming back to how small that space was. Barely wider than a person. 2 fences. A tiger reaching through the bottom of one of them. There was no version of that geometry where she had room to do anything. She just went down in a space that gave her nothing to work with. Staff deployed an air horn. The tiger pulled back. Maria was pulled clear within a few minutes. By that point, she was already in hypovolemic shock from severe neck trauma. She had catastrophic vascular injury, consistent with carotid and jugular rupture, resulting in rapid exsanguination that could not be controlled in the field. She died before reaching the hospital. Provincial investigators conducted an investigation. Unlocked corridor access and the condition of the fence were noted as contributing causes. The facility received punishment and had to make repairs before reopening. I keep thinking about the fact that she spent 3 hours that day documenting everything wrong with that facility. She saw all of it. And then she walked through an unlocked gate next to the most dangerous thing on the property. She was right about every problem she filmed. She just could not see that she had become part of one. Maria's camera had been recording from the main viewing area throughout, but did not capture the attack at a useful angle. Investigators kept the footage. It was never made public. This story is not about a perfect series of invisible failures. It is about someone who saw warning signs and kept moving forward anyway. The jungle heat of Thailand is a world apart from what comes next. What comes next is the opposite. Open forest, dead of winter, and an animal that had been eating nonstop for months, getting ready to hibernate. One content creator walked straight into that. November 9th, 2016, the Carpathian Forest region of Eastern Europe. Ethan Blake had been out here alone for 4 nights already. He was about to find out that he was not nearly as alone as he thought. Ethan Blake was 34, from Portland, Oregon. He ran a wilderness survival channel built around solo expeditions in extreme environments: Alaska, northern Canada, Scandinavia. He had real experience. He knew how to read cold weather, build shelter, and manage food systems in the field. This trip was supposed to be his most ambitious yet, a 14-day solo winter challenge in a remote Eastern European forest with minimal infrastructure and almost no human presence. What Ethan had researched was the climate, the terrain, and the general wildlife picture. What he had not researched was the specific bear behavior in the valley where he set up camp. These trips were not random adventures to Ethan. This was his life's work, the thing he had spent years building toward. People who have never done it do not fully understand what drives someone into a frozen forest alone. But that same drive that needed to push further than anyone else is exactly what put him 100 feet from his tent in the middle of the night in bear country. There were various agricultural communities around the valley that had been using their area to dispose of waste for years, and this had led to an abundant food source for the brown bears found in the area. While these bears remained wild, they were also used to the idea that there was a source of food around humans, and that is the thing that gets me about this one. Solo winter camping in a known bear corridor at the edge of farmland is already a high-risk decision before anything else happens. Ethan's cold weather experience was real, but knowing how to survive a blizzard does not prepare you for what is waiting at your food canister at 2 a.m. His tent was on elevated ground, food stored about 100 feet away in a bear-resistant canister, his headlamp and bear spray within. Reach inside the tent. Correct procedure for most environments. What a canister does not do is stop scent from traveling in cold, still air, and in this valley, the scent did not need to travel far. It was quite peaceful for the first few nights. On the 4th night, however, the canister gave hints that it had been inspected: scraping, movement, touch marks. It was duly recorded by Ethan, who moved the canister just a bit farther and remained in his place. On the 5th night, the activity was sustained, close, and no longer something that could be explained away. He grabbed his headlamp and went out to check. He had done it before on other expeditions without incident, but this time he left the bear spray behind. Brown bears in Eastern Europe typically weigh between 300 and 600 pounds for adult males, with larger individuals in agricultural edge populations sometimes exceeding that range. In the weeks before winter dormancy, they enter hyperphagia, where caloric need increases dramatically and their tolerance for competition near food drops significantly. When Ethan reached the storage area, the bear was already there. He had his camera running, the same way he documented everything on these trips. The headlamp caught the animal in the clearing. He reached for his bear spray and realized it was not on him. He had left it in the tent. The bear charged without extended warning. It surged forward, closing the distance in a blur. It hit Ethan hard enough to knock him off his feet, and he went down on the frozen ground. The attack continued immediately at close range. Heavy strikes and biting aimed wherever it made contact. The camera hit the ground during the initial impact and captured nothing usable after that point. Ethan regained partial consciousness shortly after. He was bleeding in 14-degree air with no one within miles. He crawled toward his beacon, activated it, and lost consciousness again. Search and rescue arrived approximately 4 hours later, delayed by terrain and darkness. He was alive, but in critical condition. He died during evacuation before reaching a medical facility. Investigators noted injuries consistent with bear contact across his upper body, though the full sequence could not be reconstructed with certainty from available evidence. Ethan's camera captured the moment the bear moved over him during the attack. Authorities did not release it publicly, citing the active investigation and consideration for next of kin. He did many things right, but a small moment of carelessness in forgetting his bear spray cost him his life. From a frozen Carpathian forest, the next story moves somewhere completely different. Open ground, afternoon sun, a safari vehicle on a dirt road. The next animal does not need darkness or cover. It just needs you to step outside the vehicle. February 18th, 2017, a private game reserve in East Africa. 84 degrees, dry wind, and the kind of golden, late afternoon light that Naomi Hart had traveled halfway around the world to shoot in. She had been chasing this exact hour for 4 days. She was about to find out it was not worth what it cost her. Naomi was 33, from Sydney, Australia. 4 years of safari and luxury travel content had built her a following most creators in that space would trade anything for. Her content stood out because of one thing: she always got closer than everyone else. More dramatic than anyone else was getting. She had chosen this specific reserve because its habituated lion population allowed approaches that government parks would never permit. That afternoon, the vehicle located a small group of lions, resting about 35 yards off the track. The guide stopped the vehicle and turned off the engine to avoid disturbing them. What he could not immediately confirm from his position was that one of the lionesses was near a partially concealed impala carcass the pride had been feeding on for hours. And this is the part I want to make sure lands correctly. A habituated lion and a lion sitting next to a fresh kill are not the same animal. The tolerance that makes private reserves feel special disappears the moment food is involved. That conditional tolerance is not something that shows up in the marketing. Naomi photographed from the vehicle for about 20 minutes. Good shots, but the angle was elevated. She wanted ground level. The guide was in his seat, partly occupied with a radio update from camp. Guests had been briefed clearly at the start of the drive. Stay seated and do not exit in predator zones. Still, Naomi chose to step down onto the side step outside the doorframe anyway, camera raised, looking for the angle. The guide noticed and called out immediately. Naomi heard him, hesitated, and did not step back in, wishing to capture the perfect shot. That hesitation was enough. I still do not fully understand it. A single camera angle. That is what this came down to. She can still have the good shots without stepping down. But good was not enough, and that gap between good and perfect is the thing that keeps showing up in these stories. I do not say that to be harsh. I say it because it keeps being true, and nobody seems to be learning it fast enough. African lionesses weigh between 260 and 400 pounds and can reach speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Around an active kill, they become highly defensive. They do not always give extended warning. When a perceived threat crosses close enough to the food zone, the commitment can be almost instant. The nearest lioness had been watching Naomi from the moment she stepped outside the vehicle frame. She moved through the brush, low and fast, committing only when the distance closed. The lioness struck low and fast, hitting Naomi hard enough to knock her off balance and pull her down beside the track. She clamped onto her upper body as she went down, trying to maintain control of the hold. The guide reacted immediately, driving toward the scene with the horn sounding continuously. The sudden approach forced the lioness to break off and retreat into the brush. The entire sequence lasted only seconds from the moment of contact. Naomi was conscious when the guide reached her, but her breathing was severely compromised, with significant neck trauma, chest-crushing injuries, and damage consistent with airway compromise. Field care could not stabilize her condition, and she ultimately lost her life. Wildlife authorities classified the attack as defensive behavior around an active kill site. No action was taken against the lioness. The reserve reinforced its protocols around guest positioning during predator sightings. The vehicle's mounted camera captured partial footage of the encounter. It remained under restricted access during the investigation period and was not publicly released, with the reserve citing active legal proceedings as the reason no timeline for disclosure could be given. I have gone back and forth on this one, less than most, actually. The rule was clear: stay in the vehicle. Every reserve, every guide, every safety briefing says the same thing for the same reason. The rules exist because the animals do not make exceptions. And Naomi found that out the hardest way possible. The kill she did not know about changed the speed of the outcome. It did not change who made the decision. Every story so far has involved an animal that most people would think twice about approaching. The next one is different. Elephants are everywhere, on wildlife documentaries, on safari brochures, in children's books. Most people see them as gentle giants. Caleb Mercer saw them the same way, right up until the moment one of them proved otherwise. It was October 11th, 2016, in a private conservancy bordering Tsavo West National Park in Kenya. Caleb Mercer had built his entire career on not backing down. October 11th was the day that stopped working. Caleb was a travel filmmaker who had built his following around one specific thing: proximity. Not the kind of wildlife content shot from a safe distance with a long lens, the kind where you could feel how close he was. He worked independently, traveling with just a local guide who handled driving, navigation, and access to smaller private routes and remote corridors that larger documentary crews never reached. His audience followed him because he made danger look manageable. That was the product. That was also a lie. By 2016, his content had started crossing a line as he had begun openly mocking standard safari safety rules in his videos. Distance restrictions, vehicle positioning guidelines, the advice guides gave about not approaching certain animals in certain conditions. He treated all of it as a theater designed for nervous tourists. And that's the part that really concerns me. When someone with a following tells their audience that safety rules are exaggerated, people believe them. They watch the video, they see nothing bad happen, and they file it away as proof. Some of them will go on a safari one day. Some of them are kids who will grow up thinking that is how you interact with wild animals. Wildlife does not care about your subscriber count. Silence is not permission. An animal that has not reacted yet is not an animal that will never react. The dry season that year had been severe. Water sources were shrinking, and wildlife had been pushed into tighter corridors near the conservation boundary. Local trackers had flagged something specific before Caleb's crew went out that afternoon. Several adult male elephants in the area were in must, a hormonal state that causes a dramatic shift in behavior. Aggression increases, tolerance drops, and the animal becomes unpredictable in ways that even experienced trackers treat with serious caution. The crew was specifically warned to avoid lone males near narrow brush corridors and water access routes. Caleb heard the warning, but chose to proceed anyway. When they located the elephant late in the afternoon, the guide read the situation immediately. Dark secretions were running down the side of its face from the temporal glands. The animal was rumbling and repeatedly spreading its ears toward the vehicle. These are not subtle signals. They indicate heightened agitation and increased aggression, with a significantly lowered threshold for charging. The guide advised leaving immediately. I want to stop here because this is the moment that defines everything that follows. The guide was not being overly cautious. He was reading an animal that was already showing serious warning signs in a narrow corridor with no easy exit. Caleb looked at the same situation and saw an opening shot for his next video. African bush elephants are the largest land animals on Earth, with adult males weighing between 10,000 and 13,000 pounds and standing up to 10 feet tall at the shoulder. In active must, their aggression threshold drops significantly, and they have been documented charging vehicles and reacting aggressively when they perceive an obstacle or threat. Their tusks and feet alone can cause catastrophic damage in seconds. Caleb leaned out of the open side of the vehicle with his stabilized camera rig, trying to maintain a close frame on the elephant while narrating to his audience about how safari warnings were often exaggerated. The guide remained focused on driving, prioritizing positioning and the escape route rather than filming. The elephant rushed toward the vehicle at full speed and struck the side with its head and tusks, shaking it violently. The impact and sudden vehicle movement caused him to lose his grip and fall from the side of the vehicle onto the ground beside it. In the dust and confusion, he ended up in the elephant's path as it continued its charge. He was struck and stepped on during the elephant's forward movement, resulting in catastrophic, crushing injuries. The guide attempted to reposition the vehicle, but the situation unfolded too quickly to intervene. After moving a short distance, the elephant slowed and eventually turned away into the bush. The remoteness of the location meant emergency responders could not reach the area quickly. Caleb died at the scene from crushing injuries and massive internal trauma. Wildlife investigators later concluded the attack was entirely consistent with documented must behavior in a stressed elephant that had been repeatedly provoked and obstructed at close range. The animal had displayed multiple warning behaviors before committing to the charge. Officials noted it was not acting predatorily. It was reacting defensively to something it perceived as a direct challenge in a confined space. The recorded footage was reviewed as part of the investigation. It captured the warning displays, Caleb's approach, and the moment the charge began. Authorities did not release it publicly, citing the graphic nature of the footage and the risk of encouraging similar behavior among other independent filmmakers working in wildlife areas.